Hi, my name is Brandon Staria. Years ago, I was introduced to Berkeley's argument against matter. Like Kant, this idea had awakened me from my slumber, and I have been learning philosophy through self-study ever since. Recently, I've begun studying philosophy at NDSU with my core interest being Kant, Nietzsche, and philosophy of education. It's no secret that philosophy has a serious issue with communication and public interest. My career will focus on that. Towards that end, for over a year, I've been leading a weekly philosophy discussion downtown aimed at tackling that issue. I also have 2 vocal cats and friends to die for.
Well, my bio is different from Brandon's. My name's Leanne Fisher. I'm a transfer student this semester. Before coming to NDSU, I was at NDSCS, getting my LPN and LPN. Then I decided to come to NDSU to get my bachelor's degree with the possibility of adding a minor. A few things about me: I'm from Grand Forks, loves UND hockey. My favorite season is fall. I have a 3-year-old Shiba Inu who thinks she's the boss. Out of this panel, I hope to learn to apply ethics of job seeking.
All right, so here's an introduction to our panelists here. Start your career right, the ethical responsibilities of job seekers. First up, we have Derry South, who is the Assistant Director of Career Coaching at NDSU's Career and Advising Center. Derry's mission is to help develop students and professional employees by engaging them from their first introduction to NDSU through graduation and beyond. After retiring from the Air Force in 2012, after 23 years of service, Derry served as Chief of Education and Training at Travis Air Force Base, California, in the Francisco Bay area. He has worked in educational roles, teaching military students and managing 5 college satellite campuses, serving the educational needs of the military, their families, and retired veterans. Along with him, we have, as the director of the Career and Advising Center, Becky Bay is striving to create a team focused on providing a holistic approach to student experience. From first years to alumni, the Career and Advising Center is ready to support these individuals and to create positive partnerships with our own NDSU community and beyond. She earned a BS in athletic training from the University of North Dakota and an MS in college student personnel from Western Illinois University. Currently, Becky is working towards her PhD in the School of Education, focusing on organizational learning and leadership. Becky currently serves as the co-chair of the NDSU University Retention Committee and has strong professional interests, including student leadership, advising, well-being in student affairs, and supervision and leadership models. Up next, we have Kurt Lindsey. He started with Moore Engineering as an intern in 2004. Since then, he has grown his career with Moore by fulfilling many roles, including leading engineers from the Water Resources Group, and currently serves as the office manager for Moore's Engineering West Fargo office. Kurt earned his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from North Dakota State University and is registered as a professional engineer in North Dakota. He is also certified as a floodplain manager. Kurt's rich experience includes his experience on the Cheyenne Division project and has expertise in flood control projects, including levees and dams, as well as in agriculture drainage. Kurt is also associated with various organizations within the engineering field and was awarded the Young Engineer of the Year by the FM Engineers Club and North Dakota Society of Professional Engineers. In addition to this, Kurt is honored in Prairie's Business magazine 40 Under 40, and he was awarded the National Young Professional of the Year by American Council of Engineering Companies. Kurt is known for his professionalism, excellence, and good nature that preeminates the West Fargo office and the entire company. Kurt's enthusiasm, determination are infectious. As a long-term employee, he brings a wealth of experience and insight to Moore Engineering as they furthered their mission of improving lives by building stronger communities.
Next, Tanya Sirleaf is the executive director at Hero Healthcare Equipment Recycling Organizations. Hero's mission is to provide access to affordable healthcare equipment and supplies for all. Through the collection of recycling and of donated materials, she is responsible for continued advancement of organizations' aspirations to grow distributions locally, nationally, and globally with a focus to increase awareness and save the environment. Previously, she has served over 13 years as an operations executive and healthcare leader, which included the operations of a private duty nursing agency, DME company, and 2 assisted living facilities. Tanya earned her BS in business management degree from the University of Phoenix. She is grateful to spearhead an amazing team and realizes together everyone achieves more to drive the mission and impact Hero. Next, Diane Jones. is a human resources director of Magnum Transportation. She holds a degree in applied behavior sciences from the National Louis University and has over 20 years of experience and service in human resources. Jones is a member of SHRM and FMHRA foundations. She is a certified human resource professional who has worked with employees, management, and senior leadership in a variety of industries, including healthcare, software development, consumer products, and telecommunications, on everything from bringing the best people into the fold, how to talk to them once they get there, what to do when they won't play nicely with others, and occasionally how to ask them to find new employment. In between, she talks about benefits, development, and training, and where is the best place to go for lunch. Honesty and communication with potential future employers.
So I think that with this one, oftentimes, we find students that are asking questions of like, oh, what should I tell an employer? Or what shouldn't I? And the reality is, like, oftentimes, unless to tell them where you're at in your search, and oftentimes right now, as a student or someone who's seeking, the chance that you might have more than one offer is very real. That hasn't always been the case. But maybe you have an offer from one company, but maybe you like this other one a little bit better. I'm not saying tell the employer that, but ask, where am I at in your process for this one that I don't know? And to say, I do have an offer, but you also don't have to take that first offer. So to just be asking some of those questions about where do I stand, and to share at your will where you feel like you stand with them. And to be honest with yourself, if you don't like the company, it doesn't feel like it's a place for you, that's okay. And that's really important, because I know sometimes it's like, oh, I give it a chance. You might be miserable for some time, and there might be some poor relationships. So I think just honesty with the employer, honesty with yourself, and all that communication is important.
Well, I think you just have to be honest in general. If you're a student, own it, but be proud of what you've done. If you're part of a group or part of something, especially if it's directly related to what it is you're looking for, let them know that. Let them know, that if you have, like Becky said, if you do have multiple offers, that's great. The thing that I have a hard time is when students actually don't, or when people who are interviewing don't tell me something, and then I find it out later in the process. If that question, is it okay if we run a background check? Is there anything that we're going to find? If you have a DUI from last week, say, yes, I have some, you will find something, because there's nothing worse than getting a background check and finding out that there's something on it that you could have told me. And what we find on it may not impact your position at all. It may not have anything to do with it. If I need you to be a customer service person, having a DUI doesn't impact your job, but the fact that you weren't forthcoming would make me wonder a little bit. So really, honesty, they say honesty is the best policy. I'm going to tell you yes. I'm also going to tell you, answer the question that is asked. Mm-hmm. You don't need to and then spill your entire life history after that. So just answer what is asked, and it's a conversation. Your interview with the company is a conversation. It should never be an interrogation, and it shouldn't feel like an interrogation. So if you're getting that vibe, then I would, like Becky said, be very honest with yourself. If you don't get a good vibe from the interview, you are not required to accept that offer if they give you one. So you are interviewing and learning about them at the same time. But it is very important. Don't over embellish. Market yourself, sell yourself, but make sure you're selling yourself and not who you think they want you to be. So you have to be honest from that aspect as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say they covered it very well. On the not going too far, I totally agree with that. The interview is your chance to build a relationship. I think a job in a modern environment, employees should want to be there. Employers should want their employees to want to be there and view it. I guess we view our company as a family, and the interview is really the start of a relationship. And if you come out with your whole life story and you're not at that level of a relationship yet, it's uncomfortable. And it's like, okay, I didn't ask any of that. And that's actually kind of alarming. That can be very off-putting. Not to say you shouldn't give them a window into who you are, but within boundaries. So I guess I would just add a little bit to that.
Think of your interview as the first date. How much would you say on your first date?
But you would be honest, because
Yes.
it's a
There you go.
great way to end a relationship, is dishonesty.
Exactly.
I would also add that I think that I agree with everyone else, but the level of transparency is really important when you're starting or interviewing for a position. I had a candidate that was interviewing and actually got the job, and then like a month later said, I have a vacation that was scheduled for this next month. And I'm like, wow, you didn't share that with me so that we could factor that in, that you had a vacation scheduled. So I think that transparency is the key. I think being honest, being upfront, having balance to it is really important. We know that people have flexibility, and people are being really flexible, trying to as much as you can, and trying to the partnership of, working together with the employer is really key. So when you have that interview and you really want that position, transparency is really important.
Yeah, I guess finally, I would agree with everything. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to add to those specific areas, but something on a different level is, so when you write your resume, for example, when you go to submit a job, you're trying to highlight some of your key accomplishments within each work experience or class or coursework or whatever. For example, if you're adding, if you serve 40 customers a day, you're not going to overinflate that to say I serve 60 customers or 100 customers a day. You want to be as accurate as possible. I mean, you're still going to make an estimation because it fluctuates from day to day or whatever. But when it comes time for the interview, then they're using that as a guideline when they're asking you questions. So if they ask you a specific question about, tell me about this experience, you better be able to answer it in the same tone of which you wrote it, So being open and honest about that experience, and if you failed at it, it's okay to fail at something. Just share what you learned from that failure, and that's a key aspect for an employer. They want to know that you're trainable. They want to know that you can take feedback on how to improve yourself. That's an important aspect of it. So that communication aspect, just even to get feedback later on, you wouldn't do it in the interview, like, hey, how'd I do? You wouldn't ask that, but when you get to that point, just getting some feedback on how can I improve my process, or whatever the case might be, it's really important to be open and honest about that kind of stuff.
On that whole, how did I do type thing too, that's a fair question within boundaries as well. So at the end of the interview, I would ask the question, when can I expect to hear back, or provide any more answers? That way, if that deadline passes, then you can follow up and say something polite, like, hey, I have not heard back. Just wondering if there's any more I can offer, versus, hey, you haven't got back to me, and this is a problem. But the opposite's true. Employers sometimes don't respond, and that's not okay. And so it's okay to follow up, but just the way you do it, the tone, respectful, as long as it's a job you're still pursuing after the interview and it all felt right, that's perfectly appropriate.
All right, to follow up on that, maybe to continue talking about honesty there. So why might be some reasons that job seekers don't want to be honest with you, and what's something you could say to let them know that really honesty is the best policy?
I guess my thought would be, if somebody's not being honest, I always like to assume the best, and it's because they're nervous about something. They think that there's something they're not sure how I, as an employer, would look at that. So therefore they're not saying it. And I guess I again go back to, the interviews need to be conversations. So I would like that more interviewers interview in a way that helps put you at ease, so that there can be a flow of communication instead of a, what did you do? And I did this, and just have that back and forth feel more natural. But employers really are just looking to make sure you're a good fit for their organization. Can you do what they need and what you said you could do? To follow a little bit up on Jerry, never put anything on your resume that you don't want to talk about. Because if it's on the resume, it's completely fair game. But if you're nervous about something, don't hide it. Because one, everybody can tell if you're nervous about something in the interview, and people don't lie as well as they think they do. So you can pick up on it as an interviewer. You know when somebody's kind of not answering as honestly as they should. So don't think you're getting away with it. And I guess I would just tell you, you just have to be honest. It's not, you just have to be, because everything will eventually come back anyway. You slip up somewhere in a conversation 2 months after you got the job and they're like, we honestly just terminated somebody who's well in his 50s, who said he knew Microsoft Office. He could send Outlook, he could send emails, he knew Excel. He was in the interview, he said he was great at it. And truly this happened like yesterday. We fired him because really, how many times can you tell somebody you click this button to go into Outlook to send an email from somebody who said that they already knew how to do it? So he wasn't on it. And this gentleman is in his 50s, well in his 50s. So it's not just students. It all comes out anyway. So just do yourself a favor and don't make it an issue.
Yeah. And anyone that's graduating college isn't going to be hired to lead a company. Employers know that you're coming out with the basic skills of learning. And I guess the way I view a degree is there's technical skills in your program, but really you're training to learn and to be flexible and how to read and research and figure things out. It's problem solving. If you have a lack of skill, face that. And I think anything is kind of have the courage to face things. So why would you lie on an interview? It's because fear or shame or something like that. But honestly, as you grow in your careers and achieve leadership, facing fear and doing hard things is what's going to get you to the next level. My favorite interview, and this is someone who works for us, he came into his interview and he was bleeding out the side of his head. And he looked at us all at the table as we just shook hands. He said, well, I suppose I should tell you why I'm bleeding. It wasn't like an open wound. But it was pretty raw. He had fallen pheasant hunting on a Sunday, hit his head on a rock. This was Monday morning was the interview. And he faced it right away. Hey, this is weird. Let me tell you what happened. And that was the best icebreaker ever. So if you do have some fears, maybe don't lead with something that isn't visible. But that was something we knew he had a lot of confidence and that he was going to bring a lot to that interview.
I think sometimes there might be maybe not right away, but at some point there might be a gap in employment, which technically is on your resume, even if it's not. And so to be honest about that, I think we've also experienced some, big periods of unemployment in our country. And so that's not as uncommon, but I think for employers to understand, so maybe what did you do during that gap? And I've interacted with people who are like, I could never just go work at McDonald's. And I'm like, well, shoot, if you went and worked at McDonald's, that tells me a lot about your work ethic. So I think sometimes I think there's this judgment about how other people are going to judge you. And so we create all these stories. So one, be ready to address that. And we've seen that, or, someone maybe has been a stay-at-home mom for 10 to 15 years. And so, being able to share about that and yes, there are going to be some employers that they're going to judge that they don't like it. There's a question about, and there could be some questions about skill, or if there's certifications, making sure those are current. I don't want a hygienist cleaning my teeth that is not up on their CEUs. That'd be bad, right? But again, reading the company too, and what would be the places where you would want to be. So I actually did have someone that lied, and I didn't fire them. Actually, it's a good thing that I didn't, because they're still doing some really incredible things. They said they had their master's degree, and they did not finish their thesis fully, so it hadn't been conferred yet. And actually how it came out is the advisor from that school contacted me and said, hey, I think you just need to know what's going on. There's a lot of stress, and the job didn't require a master's degree. So that was one of the reasons. And how the person reacted when I pulled them in said a lot about who they were, but we did have to kind of start over. And so, you know, I didn't let them go, but there definitely were some like trust things that we really had to work through. And they had to realize that there were going to be questions that I would ask that I wouldn't ask otherwise now, because we had to rebuild that. So to just, you know, it goes back to that honesty thing. And yeah, I think that's great about like the shame or fear. If you've been terminated, I mean, there's nothing that's going to, I don't know, I think harm an ego more than getting terminated. And this, especially if you don't know why, on behalf of the person employed. And so that might be something that you come across too, and or even for yourself. And so what do you do with that? How a person responds says a lot to me about that person. And so those are things that I'm looking for, is what did you do with that? And how did you move on? You know, you're probably not you're not the first person to be terminated. Someone was yesterday. You know, but, and you won't be the last, but what you do with that is really important.
If someone's a great candidate, but unfortunately you're just not able to take them on board for various reasons, how do you guys go about gracefully declining their offers?
So I think I'm not, so we're interviewing for a position. We have a candidate that we like, but for some reason we can't bring them on board.
Because perhaps like there was another candidate that was just a little bit over them. So you brought them aboard. How do you have a process for letting your employees, other people who applied, know that they didn't get the job quite, or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I let my recruiting team handle that. Tell them we hired somebody else.
It's true.
Actually, I seriously do have a recruiting team that handles it, so it's okay. There is a process built in to our hiring process that once we've offered a candidate a position, and they've accepted, then we will let the number two and other candidates know that. Sometimes we just let them know through email, depending on where they were in the process. If it's a number two candidate and we felt very strongly and it was like a 49-51 situation, there's probably a phone call to say thank you, but we have decided to move on. But I will tell you, I have also worked for and interviewed at companies myself where they don't do that, and you're just sort of hanging out in limbo going, all right, it's been a month, what's up? And then you look on LinkedIn and say, oh, they got a new HR person. That's great. Because, you know, now I guess I know. So companies should let candidates know. I think that that's only fair. If you applied, that you be let know at whatever point the employer says, I cannot move on with this candidate.
I would add something to that from the candidate's perspective sometimes, because I've in the past done the same thing, you know, similar. I've applied for a position, went and did the interview, was told that I did really well, and then never heard anything back from the employer, never heard anything back. He reached out about a couple of days later, said, hey, just curious, what's the process? You know, how's it coming along? You know, that kind of just doing that inquiry thing. Is there anything else I can help clarify? Do you need any more information? What's going on? And never got a response back whatsoever. I waited about 3 weeks and I called, and the person I had talked to before did not answer. He had retired, and the person who took his place, which was the job I had applied for, answered the phone. And he said, oh yeah, I started 2 weeks ago. Oh, all right then. I guess I didn't get the job. So it is very frustrating from a candidate's perspective. But at the same time, every company's got a different process. Every company has a different process for letting candidates know, how the selection process is going, how, if they were or were not selected. But your responsibility in that role is to still maintain your professionalism and to say, okay, well, I appreciate you letting me know, is there anything, and, I use that time sometimes if I'm talking to somebody who did the interview to ask for feedback, then say, hey, is there any way I can improve upon my process so the position comes open again in the future? I can look, I could have checked off those boxes or whatever's missing in my application, or however I got beat out, or whatever the case was, just use it as an opportunity to get some feedback from them if they're willing to give it. Not all of them are. But if you don't ask, you won't get it. Rarely will you ever get that. So it can be a very frustrating process. But at the same time, it's the ownership. Some of that ownership is on you too. So if you never reach back to them, then are you letting them off the hook for not telling you? Right. So, I mean, you should take some responsibility in that process as far as following up with the employer and not just letting it hang out in limbo either.
Going along with that, have you guys, when you guys hired someone who was like a potential candidate and you're like, hey, I want you guys on board, have you, once you guys hired them, have they ever declined you? What was like the worst declined thing that you've got?
I'll start. We probably all have them. The worst one I've had, it happens. It does happen. An offer comes in later and someone declines, and how they handle that is a large identifier of their character. The one that was the hardest, we hired a graduate engineer in the fall to start in the spring. And in about March, I got an email from him that he had another offer and was going to take another position. So this is someone who had signed a letter that said, yes, I will come work for you. So we stopped looking to fill the position and did not have any other candidates. And as you know, your students, you're going to look for jobs as soon as you can. It gets to March, depending on the hiring environment, there might not be many candidates left. So, and he didn't call. He was almost an employee for 6 months. I mean, practically hadn't started, but email, didn't call. So that was the first one. It was like, oh, that rubbed me wrong. And then, in fact, he took a better offer that was better for his life. I can't say a whole lot about that, but I did send him an email back and I said, just so you know, this is what this cost us. And I didn't break that down in money, but you just cost us 6 months of not filling this job. There are no candidates left, so we have to start our search over. Just so you're aware, your actions had these consequences. And I let him know that. And I was okay burning that bridge because I don't want him to ever come work for us, the way he handled it. I don't know how to say he should have handled it a certain way, but the way it went down wasn't a good taste. And if that application ever came in again, it would not get a discussion. So there are good ways to handle it. I'll let other people talk about those.
Just to add to what he just mentioned, I think crossing those roads is very important in how you, give your rejection to that company, because, this area is so small. People are crossing paths all the time. And I always tell people, please have integrity. If, you're not going to take the position or what have you, let us know, because you never know how we're going to cross paths again down the road. So that goes back to the honesty again. It goes back to, having integrity as you, resign or depart or reject the position. So I think that's really key and important.
We talked about the interview being like a first date. This whole process is like dating. I mean, like when you go to make an offer, I would always, honestly, as the person, like I'm like, want to give someone a job. I'm nervous about it. Like I want them to say yes, like that is the person I want to hire. And so it does feel a little bit like dating, like, do you like me? I like you, check yes or no. And so it's okay to say no. And at times sometimes it does feel like you got led on, like they really, seem to enjoy their time during the interview and all those things, but you also don't know what else they're getting. And honestly, in the work that I've done and in higher ed, so prior to being the Career and Advising Center, I worked in residence life for 15 years here at NDSU and other places too. it's not small in the region, it's small in the world. Like
Mhm.
that field is small in the world. And so you just know people across the country, across the world. And so like how that would happen was super important. Like I would know where people would end up. In fact, even in the interview process, and I would do a wrap up with those people because they spend a whole day with us. I would ask how their process was going. And if they felt comfortable, I said, would you mind sharing where else you're looking? Like it helps me know a little bit of where our competition is because there's very similar jobs all across the country. And to know, like, is there something that we're not doing well? Quite honestly, for a long time, there were two major things. And for this position, it was live-in hall directors. So bachelor's, master's level hall directors. So they're living on campus, but they are a full-time professional. We didn't have a domestic partner policy. Well, right then and there, I was discriminating against a lot of people. And that was something that like, I don't get to just make those decisions, unfortunately. The other thing that we didn't have for a long time was a pet policy. And so, there's people that like, they're 24, 25 years old. They want to feel like they're grown up, even if they are living with, first year students. And the fact that we didn't have a pet policy, oftentimes that's the reason they would go somewhere else. And that allowed me to push a pet policy through eventually was that data of like, hey, we're losing really good people because of some really silly things. And so again, that communication, and it does stink when someone says no. I mean, I'd rather have that than they say yes and then not show up. Had that happen, that's cool. Or the day they were supposed to start, then they tell you. So you're even behind another few months before, and so you're just really at that point, you're starting over. So it's not fun to say, I mean, if you've ever had to break up with someone, it's not fun. It doesn't feel great, but once you do it, you're fine, you're done. So it's the same thing with an employer. If something changed, like I can be more happy for you if this is a better thing for you, as long as you're upfront as you can be about it. So I think that's where it's okay to say no, but also like evaluate your options as best you can before then.
I've also had people decide we've been ghosted. We're expecting people to show up and yeah, they've not. The other thing that is very frustrating is somebody's been on the job for a day and a half, a week, and they've decided that it's not a fit for them for whatever it is. I don't have this so much in my professional areas. I do have it more in my warehouse kind of area, I do admit. But truly they go to lunch and then just don't come back. So job abandonment is really harsh, and it's very difficult because first of all, you don't know, did something happen? Are they okay? And then they're not there. And the odds of rehire if somebody just walks off the job is next to nothing. Even though we're in a tight market right now, I just can't imagine feeling that I could bring somebody back who just walked off the job. So if somebody doesn't want to work for me, I would much rather hear about it. I understand that in your case, you got him for 6 months. I would have been the same thing. There would have been multiple conversations behind closed doors. Very frustrated that 6 months into it, he suddenly left. But at least at some point he let you know. So now you're not waiting for him to show up one day. So
That's true.
but I would still be mad. I totally get it. But yeah, please don't just walk. Yes, respect them as you would want to be respected.
Yeah, I can add to that for sure. My daughter has some experience in that. She's a supervisor at a place here in town. And quite frequently, it's in retail. So quite frequently people will show up and then at lunch not come back, or call in sick and not ever call back again. But you have to, if you don't look at that from the employer's perspective, such as the 6 months, oh, by the way, I'm not coming. That's 6 months of wasted time on the employer's side. It costs a lot of money. Think about it from the other coworkers in your department if you would show up. So now she's had somebody on shift or on schedule, I should say, for over 2 weeks. hoping that they're going to come back to work and assist her and her other 2 people in her shop to process through a 5-person's job. And there's only 2 and a supervisor now in that process, because people just leave and they don't come back, and they don't bother to let them know, hey, I'm not coming back, So then, in fact, there was one employee who actually came into the store to go shopping, and they went, hey, I recognize you. You work here. He's like, because he still tried to use his discount. It doesn't work that way. Right. So there's some serious integrity issues with some people. And in as far as on the flip side too, on the interview process, if you have other opportunities pending, like I have 3 other interviews scheduled, let them know, right? Or I have another offer, I'm waiting another offer to come in. Let them know up front. That's that honesty component too. It helped from a hiring official. It says, okay, I really need to be on the ball if I want this person. I'm going to try to rush through my hiring process, maybe a little quicker than usual, to try to get that first offer in and hopefully be better than the other offer waiting. But it also lets me know that if you're waiting for another offer to come in, that I know that my start date is going to be pushed out a little further, because I want to give you the opportunity to make the best choice for you. I don't want to say, sorry, you got 2 days, you're done. Some employers do that, I guess, but in my world, I don't want to do that. I want somebody who wants to be there and who says, yes, this is the right fit for me. So, and part of that's in the interview process itself is just determining, because an interview is a 2-way street, it's communication. It's like, here, I want to learn about you, but you should be learning about my company as well, and about our department and stuff. So in that process, hopefully you're making those decisions. And if you're not feeling the vibe right away, the sooner you let the employer know that, hey, this isn't a good fit, the better off everybody is.
What is your guys' policy for notifying candidates that they did not get the job?
The policy?
Like, what's your guys' policy? Like, do you guys have a policy for like telling them that they didn't get the
I
job?
don't know if it's a policy so much as it's just a practice that we just let them know in various ways how we do it. I wouldn't call it a policy.
Yeah, I would say the same. We don't necessarily have a policy, but the level of job or the depth of the relationship may dictate how we communicate it. So if it's a candidate that applied and there's been an interview and they didn't get the job and they weren't number 2, maybe it could be an email, it could be a phone call. We've had internal hiring, and that gets to be harder because I've had it where I've interviewed 2 or 3 of I would consider them friends that I've worked with for 15 years, going for a position that I'm the hiring manager for, and I got to let 2 of them know they didn't get it. And so that's probably lunch. It should be lunch. It should be something where it's face to face, own up to it, give them some feedback and let them ask questions. And those are harder, but I wouldn't say there's a policy on it. It kind of depends on the position.
At NDSU, there's a process. And so it's fairly automated, which I don't love. And so I've actually worked with our main HR to say, okay, this person has accepted, but I need you to not like push the button, because I have my own personal philosophy is that if a person took the time to come to campus to interview, then the least I can do is give them the respect of a phone call. And I let them know that at the interview too. And I'm like, it's not always the most fun conversation, but I'm going to give you that. And, typically that's like 3 to 5 people. So, but it is not uncommon with universities to get like a rejection letter. Unfortunately, some universities, it could be like 6 to 9 months after you've even interviewed, because processes are super slow. So that is the one thing too that I would caution. And it's probably a little bit different between like education and industry, is that in higher ed, I tell people, I was like, don't ever give a time, like a specific time frame of when they're going to hear back from you, or buffer that, because I don't know if Dennis has experienced this. There's red tape all over the place. We're recording. And I would have a general idea, but I would always give a buffer too, because I also let's say I offer someone else, and I don't want someone to think just because they didn't hear from me means that they didn't get the job, because I could offer someone else. They say, no, well, you're my number 2. So I don't want you to totally count us out either. So I'm pretty, I give a bit of a buffer, but if they took the time to come to campus and interview with us, I am going to respond to them before that no notification is. And I know for some people that have received those letters, they're like, well, that was there, it just kind of irks them a little bit because it's like, yeah, I already knew that. So I also let the people know that I'm saying no to over the phone, that they will get another communication from NDSU that says no, so that they're kind of aware, because otherwise it does feel pretty icky. So there are some places that have processes, but we're a state entity, and that's probably part of that.
I would add to that process, like during the interview, frequently the question that's asked to me is, when can I expect to hear back? Right? That kind of question. And where I want to be vague, I also want to give them an answer. I don't want to say, well, it'll happen. You'll expect an email if or a phone call from me, one or the other, So I'll say, well, we have, a couple more candidates to interview, hopefully, and then we kind of walk through the process, because then we have a committee meeting, we have to discuss feedback, I don't give them all the details, but I walk through the process. And then if my deadline, say I give them, expect possibly something within the next 2 weeks. If something delays that process, I'm still going to reach out to all those candidates that were interviewed and say, hey, just want to let you know it's taking longer than expected. Please be patient with the process, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But at that same time, because it's a delayed hire, I also say, if you've already accepted another position, please let me know so we can, take you off the consideration. Because, it becomes, again, back to that two-way communication component. It's very, very important.
All right, so we have a question from the live stream here. The question is, how can society improve / normalize the etiquette of notifying a potential employer that they do not want a job or that they have accepted a different one?
Professionally, just helping educate society on professionalism, instead of the blunt, because I know some of the younger generations, I'm not calling anybody out, but it's very much text, shorthand, blunt and to the point sometimes. That is not what professionals communication is. It is, dear sir or ma'am, I really appreciate the opportunity. I love the interviewing with your company. I really, give me the time, et cetera, et cetera. However, I've accepted a different offer. So it's just really having that attitude of gratitude and the honesty and the response to say, hey, I'm sorry. However, I've already taken another position. I really appreciate the opportunity. I learned a lot in the process, or, whatever, just a couple nuggets from the experience that you could, or from the company even, and here's why I picked somebody else, maybe even, but just having that transparency to say that that has happened. But I don't know that from a societal perspective, that is the norm anymore. It's not, it's very much, you said no to me, so I'm saying no to you, kind of poking the eye kind of mentality sometimes.
I think until we start treating our candidates consistently in the same way, like the number of times that we hear that people have been ghosted by employers, we are emulated, and I say we really large, and the people on this panel probably wouldn't have been selected if we weren't like pretty ethical, good hiring managers. I just met some of them, but they talk a good game. Trust them. It's working. Yeah. I need to hear more from Tanya though. But I think it's a two-way street. And yeah, like I say, the number of times that I hear from candidates, and maybe not just for our jobs, but just, we mentor a lot of students that are looking for things, alums, that they get ghosted, then how can employers expect the same? Like they're kind of leading the way. And so I think, unfortunately, it is a societal thing. It's not all on the candidates. Now, it would be nice if some of our if our candidates, since sometimes our employers can't figure that out, that they can show like really good respect.
Right. So you're working with people. So just remember that all the time, even if it's a big company, if it's got the feel where you feel like you want to be there. I mean, maybe you want to work online and never talk to people. Everyone's got a different personality, but I guess the company I work for and the relationships I want to work with people I respect, and that it's a two-way conversation and a two-way relationship. So, I would say we have hired people that have turned down an offer. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've got another offer. I'm going to take it. And thank you. You let us know. Yeah. 6 months after you signed yes, again, But I've also had people that have left and they've either come back, and that's great. They did it in a manner that was very respectful. They resigned respectfully and they tried something else and came back, or they're thriving somewhere else and we're very happy for them. A former CEO of ours told me probably the first week I worked, hey, this is great. We hope you love it here. But if you ever find a better opportunity that'll advance your career, we'll be very happy for you. And I've not left in 15 years. 16 years. So I don't feel tied there, but it's a place I want to be. And so hopefully as employers, we're making it a place that job seekers and employees want to be. But employees, again, it'll be more professional, and it's that word professionalism on your side to communicate that way. And hopefully by being professional like that, you'll end up at a place you want to be.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times people want to give back how they receive something, right? So in an example, if the employer is not communicating professionally with you, you have a tendency, I say you as in the audience, people in general have a tendency to mirror back what they've had done to them, kind of thing. But really it's where you have to take the higher road in that process and say, you know what, I don't think I'm being treated well here. Probably that's why you're picking a different job in the process too. But just taking the higher road and saying, you know what, I haven't been treated professionally here. Internally, you're saying that, but I'm still going to be a professional back, because it is a small world. You never know what's going to happen. And as an example, I was working with an alum who wanted to interview for this position. He didn't get selected. He interviewed or applied to another position, multiple positions. He was selected for an interview, but he was waiting a result from a different interview he had. And so he turned down that interview. He said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to interview. And he did not do that in a professional manner. He did not get the other job, applied for another position here at NDSU, and got communication back saying, thank you, but no, thank you. We will not even consider interviewing you because you didn't communicate professionally the last time. So more than likely you're not, that's your norm. You know, so again, it all comes back to you. So how you treat others is how you should want to be treated back, you know? So even if you're not that way, or not treated back the same way, it doesn't give you the right not to treat others professionally, if that makes sense.
Just as a quick follow-up, you can, because it's about learning, changing society. I think employers can say, this is what you can expect from us. And would you do me a favor? If you accept another offer, just let us know, because that's helpful. So just turning it around, it's one of Cialdini's techniques of asking a favor, and you tend to get the response. So
I have a question that I'm interested in. I don't think it's a fair question. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it. So here we go. We all know that if you have higher ethical people, they're more likely to be ethical when they're working for you. If you hire somebody who isn't, then you usually have problems. I think all of us agree on that one. So when you're doing this interview, how do you figure out if somebody is that core and ethical person? I told you it wasn't going to be fair.
So I really try to take notes and listen. Listen for their core beliefs, kind of get a gist of who they are as far as their character, and just really listen in, because that tells me a lot about who they are. And what they're bringing to the table, what their work ethics are, and where they've been, and where they're looking to go. So I really take keen sense of listening to the person and just kind of keying into those little details about who is this person really, what are you really bringing to the table, and who are you, and what are your core beliefs. So I really try to listen then, and then I try to ask those key questions based on what I heard.
And to follow up on that, I would say that the listening is very important. It has to be active listening, though. I can't be listening, trying to react to what I think they're going to say. So it's asking a question, what is it you enjoy doing professionally? Actually getting an answer to that question, and then it's okay to be silent. If you stop talking and I give you 3 seconds and then I ask a question, I might not be giving you time. And so by being quiet, you people don't like silence. So if I don't immediately follow up. I have had multiple people just then continue to talk because they feel like they have to say something. And if you laid a comfortable conversational kind of groundwork in the beginning, oh, they'll trip themselves up every time. Because they kind of just can't help themselves because they've just got to fill in. And you start to see those individuals who have the overinflated sense of self, or who really need you to understand how great they were in their last job and that everybody else was an idiot. They kind of can't help themselves, really. So that's one way to do it. And then there are particular questions, behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a customer who was wrong. How did you handle that? And then hearing their answer can definitely also give you insight into who they are. And if they can tell you how they handled something in the past, you have kind of a good idea how they may handle it in the future.
I would say there's a continuation process too. So I totally agree. Active listening, good questioning, a good communication, and having an atmosphere where you can hear or they're comfortable responding with a scenario or an example of a success or a failure, as long as they've also sharing a result of the success, not just, hey, I did it and it was really good. Okay, great. More detail, please. Asking for more details in that process, or, I failed at this, but here's what I learned from it. Right. So again, you're looking for those characteristics and those traits of, I'm willing to grow, I'm willing to learn, some of the key things that maybe I'm looking for in my position. But then there's also, once I'm taking those notes, I'm writing those down to ask the flags maybe that I might have had to their references. So I'll ask the references after the interviews if they make it to the final and say, hey, what is this? How is this? How is the person respond to this situation? Give me an example of them doing this in this work environment, something like that, to see if there's an alignment with what the reference said versus what they're saying. And then you can kind of really check some truth factors there.
Yeah, we kind of go into interviews assuming the minimum skills, and we'll verify that you've got the skills you put on your resume. But I interview a lot more on character than I do on skills. And it's the leading questions like, what does accountability mean to you? And then you sit and you wait. And people that really don't understand what that means, that's one of our company's values, that don't understand what accountability means or can't put it into words, that may be a red flag. Or what does kindness mean to you? If you don't understand those, you're probably not going to fit our company. There's probably a company for you, but it's not us. So it's those are the questions. It's culture questions that we're asking more than technical questions, because if you're not going to be a good fit, it's not going to last very long. It's not going to be fun for us or the employee. If there's somewhere it doesn't fit culturally, there is a place for them, but they got to find the right spot. And so do we. We got to find the right fit. We had a candidate one time that was an absolute perfect resume, and he was asked the question, do you like to work in a team? And we sat silence. And the answer was no, I really like to work independently. Well, that sounds fine. I mean, we like to do things, right, and accomplish things, but every project we have is a multidisciplinary team, and you have to get along with people. You have to relate to people. You have to be able to do your work and trust them to do their work. It's a team heavy environment. So that was a non-offer. And I couldn't believe after the interview, we weren't going to make this person an offer, but it was not going to fit with an answer like that. And that person's very successful in their career. It's a small world. I know exactly where he's at, but it wasn't a good fit for us.
I'm going to do a follow-up, but this isn't fair, but I'm going to. So here's, I learned from actually being on committees to hire. And by the way, I think this goes both ways. The candidate should know whether or not the employer is ethical as well. And so it's really kind of hard at this to figure out who's doing what, because if you're smooth and you're presenting really well, that confuses a lot of people. So, but one particular thing, you tell me if I did it all right, or if this was an unethical thing for me to do. I learned, have these folks meet other individuals in the company. all levels, including people who might be a receptionist, somebody who, because we had a person here as a candidate, we unfortunately hired, who, because he didn't think that our administrative staff mattered. It was clear from his body language that was the case, and that I voted against him on the committee, as I voted. But so I like to look at it, because if you've got somebody who thinks somebody doesn't matter, or they can be put to the side, that's a no-go. That's a no. But that could be putting that person who is maybe more vulnerable in a bad position, because you're testing against an actual human being. So what do you think? Was that all right to test them for their ethics that way?
I guess I would have to know what you mean by test them. If they just came in and say, hi, I want to, I'm here to meet with Dennis, and he treats the individual with a tone or a body language that is rude and dismissive, but it was part of the normal process, I don't know that I would really call it testing. I mean, you were just being aware of how he's interacting with, and it could be a she, sorry, how they're interacting. So I wouldn't say that was unethical, but if you're sort of setting it up, then I probably think that might not be the best way.
Something that I like to do is when we interview candidates and they go along the process and they get a little further down the road, we do like a shadow day. So they can come in and they can spend at least 2 hours with us. And so we can really get to know who they are and they can know who we are. And then they can also meet with those other employees and ask questions and kind of get a feel. So that works a little better for us, because now we have a better insight as to who this person is, just for a few hours. Because when you're sitting in front of the interview, people are telling you what you want to hear, and you don't really get to see all, but you get a small preview. So we do a shadow day sometimes, and that really helps us to make that the better exchange with people and get to know who they are.
And I think to follow up on something Keith said, at some point, they're looking to see how you fit within the organization. All of these interviews that you do, we do review the resume first. And if your resume doesn't speak to the basic requirements that we have a position, you're not in front of us anyway. So we assume that there's a basic level of you being able to come in and do what it is we're going to hire you to do. And we know that where you are in your career, how much we're going to have to train you. Do we have to train you on how to do the job still? Or do we just really have to train you how to do how the company does it? But this whole interview process is how well do you fit with me? It's a culture fit. It's a bit of a personality fit. It's a ethics fit. It's a values fit. Do your values match my organization? If I'm looking for somebody who's in customer service, the values I need for that person are to be very caring about my customers, to be very inquisitive as to what the issue is, and to be able to help them. So I need somebody who's going to come in and culturally fit in that environment. I'm sure I could teach anybody to pick up a phone and answer the call. How do you answer the call? How do you respond to that? So I think that's the thing that makes it kind of hard to understand, is it's hard to put into words on a job ad or in a resume, hey, this is my culture, this is who I am. Because that's not, even to kind of go back to that society question, that's not how society looks at a resume. Resumes, they don't want to see, well, hey, I'm a really great person and I can talk to anybody and I can joke with my brothers and we get along really well and I'm just a blast to be with. That's not the resume you want to see as an employer. But yet, that's kind of who I want to figure out who you are, to know whether or not I want to go further into the process. That's what makes it so hard. Lord, I hope that made sense.
Sounded good.
I'm gonna pick on Kurt just a little bit because I know. So Kurt, you and I have had conversations about fit before, and that you know, for some people, fit is you look like me. And I know that you and I have had that conversation about differences, and what you look like isn't, that's not, you don't have to look like me. Can you describe an experience where the fit was important and the look like was completely irrelevant?
Sure. So we're always looking for people that align with our culture and our values. And our values are, there's 5, put 'em on the spot: respect, integrity, accountability, loyalty, and kindness. And we do have a personality, and it's a family environment. Not every company's got that. Not everybody wants to be there, but we want people that want to be there. So one of my answers I was thinking of earlier is kind of, we have to go with our guts to some that is instinct. So when we're looking at fit, how does a person present themselves? What does respect mean? Like Dr. Cooley just said, if somebody comes in and doesn't respect everybody, then they're not following our values that we have said are important. So that would be a violation of our cultural value of respect. It's everybody. It's not your peers and up. You can't just respect that. Or, yeah. So I'd like to think we have a very unbiased hiring process of evaluating candidates based on their personality and their minimum skill. And so I've met several people at career fairs that aren't like the other people that work for us, but maybe they had the personality of, hey, this person's a really good fit. One, for instance, she came back, she dropped off her resume early. She was a graduate student and had never had a professional career before, was new to the country. And she dropped off her resume, but she smiled. She did it just so comfortably. We're like, we should probably talk to her, put her in the good stack of resumes. We have those. Just kidding. Anyway, she ended up in the good stack. She came back. We told her, check in later. We thought that would be like apply online in a month or a week or something. She came back 2 hours later. She's like, have you decided if you have any more open positions yet? I was like, wow, she's enthusiastic. She's professional. She's willing to go get it. Like, she's after this. And so she got hired. She hadn't graduated yet. She was working on her master's degree, and we knew that, but we wanted her on the team. There was just a gut check right away that person was a fit. She was awesome. We wanted her to work for us. So actually brought her in as an intern so she could finish her master's degree, because we wanted her to not go find another job in the meantime. So that's one. I don't know if you've got a more specific question than that, but we shouldn't be assuming we're going to get a certain person. And right now there's so few candidates available, but we also haven't reduced our hiring standards. So we're trying to get to know people better than ever. But we also have to move quickly, which maybe in the state environment's tough, but we have candidates come in right now and it's like, boy, if we don't make a decision this afternoon, we're going to lose them. And that gets a little bit tough, but we still have to slow down, make sure the people we're bringing in fit our culture. We went through a period of rapid growth 8-10 years ago, and we hired people that weren't necessarily a cultural fit, and they didn't last very long. They did okay work for a little while. It felt transactional, and it wasn't built for long-term success. So that definition of fit, I think every company's got a person that fits, and that person could be many different types of people. You just need to be open to that and understand who you are and the type of person you're looking for.
Can I ask Tanya a question? Sure. So Tanya, I know you've got a breadth of experience with hiring because you've worked for a placement agency. I also know that you've had conversations with people about applications to make sure that you are hiring with the most openness and welcoming as possible. Could you talk about what, as you frame now that you're in a hiring manager position, how do you make sure that your posting for positions is inviting to everyone and not just a certain category?
Yeah, I think with us really trying to share what our vision and our mission is really important. And the fact that, we're trying to make a great impact. And so we're looking for those individuals that have the mindset of being able to help, being able to give, being able to work in unity. One of the things that we strive for that we always share is that team is so important to us. And I always stress that together, everyone achieves more. And we have a great team aspect at our organization. And so we're looking for those candidates that come with a mindset of teamwork, helping, not just about you as an individual. We want to make sure that you're growing in those areas as an individual, and we provide training for that. But our openness is about working together, helping one another, helping all of us to succeed, and coming with those, skill sets that are transferable, and where someone else is lacking, then maybe you can help that other person and train them to get better in that area. So we try to focus in on openness culturally. We're such a small group, so family, I always say this as well too, that we spend more time at work and with your work family than you do with your family at home. So our environment at work is so critically important, because we are a family, because we spend the most of the time together. We're there 8 to 9, 10 hours a day. And by the time you get home in the evening, it's time for you to eat dinner, go to bed, and start all over again. So our work family is so important. And so we value everyone that comes through our doors, and we try to make sure it's cohesive and that we're working together as a team. And that's where our openness comes from, supporting each other and helping each other.
All right. So we live in a digital age now, and that comes with an online presence and image. Have you guys had any experience with having issues with someone's online presence in the hiring process? Or are there any concerns that you need to look out for nowadays with an online presence being there?
I'll start. That's okay.
Please.
Yes, your digital footprint is very, very, very important. So social media is a huge thing in the world today, and people now have had it for, like, I didn't have it growing up, so I didn't have the opportunity for much of my stupidness to be exposed to the world, where today everything is videotaped, everybody's watching, pictures are posted everywhere, and your mistakes are on display, right? The decisions you make are on display. So there's an important aspect of that. And really speaking back to the integrity and the trust aspect questions earlier too, if you have something on your digital presence that you don't want your grandma to see, for example, like, man, I don't want my grandma to see that. Well, you better find a way to take it down, right? If possible. So clean that stuff up to make it a professional, especially once you start looking for employment. But if that stuff is still out there, right? So if it's an employer references that, I mean, they start researching your social media, looking up your different profiles, and they might see something that they might question, right? That's an aspect that you need to say, yeah, in my youth, I made a mistake and this is what I did. Or yeah, I'm not proud of that moment or whatever. Just having that openness and that transparency to say that. But at that same point, as an example, I had a leader under me once when I was living out in California, who, well, I'll just share the whole experience because otherwise it will make a ton of sense. So my wife and I ran a ministry at our church, and we had about 30 leaders underneath us. And one of our leaders posted a picture on social media, kicked back on his bed, holding a beer in his hand to the camera, looking very sloppy. In the whole photo was very sloppy. It was a messy room. He was looking like a slob and just toasting there, but there's no comments or anything on the picture. He just posted that out. Well, in a church environment, that's not necessarily an acceptable image to have, right? And then to find out that he's a leader in the church, or a leader within a ministry in the church, what does that say about that ministry? What does it say about the church? How are they to support this, et cetera, et cetera? So we asked him a question, said, hey, could you mind taking that picture down? If anybody's looking at the church, they're going to see your connection, blah, 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 blah. And he absolutely refused to do it. He said, no, I will not take it down. It's just there, and that's who it is. And you don't understand. You just don't understand. Well, tell us why we don't understand. What happened? What's going on? Refused to tell us. So he ended up getting fired, not just from our ministry, but from the church, because he was actually an employee of the church too. He got fired because of that, because he refused to, first of all, explain the image and then not take it down, right? After the fact, we learned that he was actually toasting the death of his best friend. That was the anniversary of a death of his friend that he tried to revive and was unsuccessful in the process during a car wreck or something of that nature. Well, context, right? Had we had the context of that, a toast to my buddy, right? Okay, I get it, right? It wouldn't have been such a big deal because it wasn't like our church was against drinking. It wasn't that aspect. It wasn't like this is a taboo subject. It's just the context with, or the image without context, right? So it's very important if you have something out there that may be questionable, to at least have a descriptor on it to find out why it's there. What's the significance behind what's going on here? If you can't take it down or refuse to take it down. I know in society today, there's certain things that people stand up for, like this is a social concern of mine, or this is a value of mine, or whatever, and I'm going to support this cause or this initiative or whatever. That's fine, as long as there's a justifiable approach to it that's not discriminatory, it's not questionable from that perspective, right? And then I'll caveat just in closing here on this. If there is something that is your core value of who you are, you're going to stand up for this belief no matter what it is, and the employer questions it and says, hey, I don't really like that, you probably don't want to work for them anyway because your value alignment isn't there, right? There's something that says, this is a question here. Okay, well, maybe this isn't a good fit after all, right? So it's a two-way street in that process. But yes, that digital presence is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I can't imagine growing up in an era of social media just because we got to fail very privately and it was still public in our bubbles, but challenging. Those things are forever. I'd say something, we don't do a whole lot of digging up on people, but as soon as you start, your coworkers I mean, everything's public. So just assume you're not hiding anything. People are going to find it. The things that would really also kind of scare me as an employer, someone who's constantly negative online, is their perspective completely negative and they're going to bring that into a work environment and gossip and cause derision. That is something that would scare me as an employer because that is toxic environment stuff that is way more fireable to me than screwing up on a project and costing the company some money.
Yes.
That's forgivable. Ruining the culture and taking it down is not. That is not okay. So those are some of the things that really too, like if you're constantly antagonizing on a comment section, that's probably something that's going to turn off an employer. I guess that was just one of the additional thoughts I've had of things that are out there that you might not think that that's making an impression, but that's saying a lot about your character. Are you generally upbeat? It's okay to have problems with things, but if that's the tone you're taking, that's probably the tone of your life. And yeah, don't put that out there if it is.
Well, I'll agree in that I don't encourage my team or the recruiters to look to check somebody out on social media before we fire them because I don't want to create a bias. Because whether we like it or not, this is really all about people. And people look through life through their own filter. So if you've got something on social media and the recruiter doesn't like it, well, is that going to skew things? I would like to say no, but I've seen it happen. But really, it's when you become an employee, you have to understand that anything you've had on social media is fair game. And trust me, HR will hear about it. People will come in and say, so-and-so posted on social media that they feel really down today and that, they don't feel like they belong. Or so-and-so, did you know so-and-so's best friend passed away? Or did you know 3 years ago, so-and-so went to this party and did this? I mean, they'll bring me the phone and show me. So be aware that you have to own what's on social media. So if you don't want to own it, don't post it. I like what you said. If you don't want your grandma to look at it, no, don't put it out there. I like
Grandmas have Snapchat too.
they do. They do.
Okay, so let's drill in on a little something there. So let's imagine a situation where someone does have something on social media from, like, let's say a past life, and they now cannot just get it off the website or whatever. They have don't access or anything like that. And then they have a transformational life and now they're upstanding citizen and stuff like that. But anybody that looks them up can clearly see their past life. What's the process you would like to have that dealt with? Is that something you would, because you guys mentioned it's like a first date when you're having the first interview, is that something you want to mention right away? Or when should a job seeker bring that kind of hideous part of their life up. If it's going to influence any issues.
Yes, when it's relevant is when you would bring it up. I don't know that. I wouldn't want somebody to walk in and go, hi, I was arrested for shoplifting when I was 18. I mean, that's not how I would want it to come up, but if there's a question about what does ethics mean to you or what does integrity mean to you? Well, integrity means that you learn from your mistakes, and I did this at 18 and it was a problem, et cetera. That kind of thing. So I wouldn't lead with it, but again, if you put it out there, you own it no matter when you did it. So be willing to explain it when it comes out.
So I just wanted to come back to, there's a lot of talk of saying that employees are like family and stuff like that. Family here can kind of be vague. Would you guys be able to give a little more examples of like what you mean by like when you treat someone, when someone is a part of your family, what does that kind of look like? What are some actions you guys do to represent that?
Sure. I think I've said that word a few times, so I'll say what I have in mind. So I'm thinking healthy family. I know not everyone's blessed to come from a healthy family, and that's reality. And not every company is a healthy environment, just like there's unhealthy places to be. When I think of a healthy family, I think of mutual respect, mutual caring. The for instances I've got from ours is if somebody's moving, some other coworker says, hey, I've got a trailer, and 3 other coworkers throw their hands up to help them move. That to me is a family. You're taking care of each other's needs. That's probably the most basic, for instance, but a general care and concern. If someone did post on social media, I'm feeling down. Hopefully somebody cares about them enough to say, hey, you all right? I know we've got an employee resource program at work that if somebody's really struggling with things, it could be many, many things. There's resources that are external. You don't have to tell someone at the company what's going on, but we provide that as a benefit so they can go take care of their issues. We've had people take very long leaves of absences to deal with very serious things that I don't know what they were. I don't need to know. But that's, they're a good employee. They're trying hard. They want to go out and better themselves, and they have some things to deal with. We're going to support them through that, and hopefully they come back and their issues are handled and they can resume employment. But that's what I think of, I guess.
I would say to that aspect, or to piggyback on that too, is that aspect of the moving culture, right? So if I'm moving, everybody pitches in kind of thing. It's the same thing at work. Like if you're overworked, people are volunteering to help you, whether it's their role or not. They're volunteering to say, hey, I'll help you out, right? I mean, that's what I would do for my family. If my dad needed help moving stuff around, hey, I'm here. Just give me a call. I'm happy to help. And then also, having the water cooler conversations, just having this be able to share your social life with them, your personal life, and just having that friendly environment that says, hey, dude, what's up, man? How things going? Oh, you're under the weather? Oh, that sucks. No, you should have more of a conversation, like really what's going on, and really show that genuine concern for their well-being and not just brushing it off. Saying, oh man, I hope you feel better, and not ever checking up again when they don't show up 3 days later. There should be some follow through with that process. I know in our department, we do that quite a bit. We have folks that call in sick, and we have a Teams group for the entire department. And somebody says, hey, I'm feeling under the weather, not coming in today. It's just like bloop, 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 bloop. Everybody's like, oh man, hope you feel better. Hope things are going good. Anything you need, I'll bring you dinner, whatever. And just that culture of support, I guess maybe is a good way to say that.
Laugh. You can laugh. That makes everything better.
Right. And there's companies that aren't like that at all. It's not where I would want to be, but that's maybe where some people want to be. The luxuries in a big city that's, named Chicago or somewhere, an engineering firm like us, we could go through engineers very rapidly and not care who we hire or expect them to stay long term. In this market, we need people to stay long term and want them to stay long term. You might have a big city firm where, okay, you're going to work for me 85 hours a week. You're going to burn out at a year, but I'm going to pay you really well. And I don't care about you. This is all about money. Hey, that's an upfront negotiation. Right. That, as long as that works for both parties, let it rip. that might be something you want, as long as you understand what you're getting yourself into, and that's the culture and environment you want. It's not for me, but there's very successful companies that operate like that. So not to say family's the perfect thing, but that's, again, I think it's fulfilling, and that's where I want to be.
So we're near the end. How about we do it this way? We always like to have a takeaway at the end of this. So I ask each of you, what's the big takeaway that our students and employees should have about the ethics? What's the most important thing about it that they should remember? We'll start here.
I think it's important to carry yourself with integrity and honesty. Be who you are genuinely. But remember that it is that the whole process is people. And you have to treat people the way they would like to be treated, not just the way you want to be treated. So always keep that in mind.
Yeah, I just, from an ethical perspective, integrity in the workplace, there's big dollars on the line, perhaps, or there's a million reasons. Trust builds that culture, and really that kind of makes or breaks success. A takeaway for students right now is this time in history is a really unique employees market. And so you've got the opportunity to ask a ton of questions during interviews and really get to know the firms and be choosy that you're finding the right place for you. I know when I was coming out of school, I needed a job, and hopefully someone would give me one, and I got one. So that was different, but I couldn't shop. I didn't have, 10 options or anything like that. So just take it. It's a huge benefit right now. Be happy about that and ask a lot of questions and find the right comfort level for what you want.
Yeah, that's good. I'd say transparency, open, honest communication is probably the most important thing, I think, from a student perspective is don't lie about your experience. Be open and honest with that, but also show your initiative and willing to learn, right? Say, hey, I'm here, I'm positive, express yourself in a positive way and just be open and sometimes over communicate, because one thing that I see a lot, I do a ton of mock interviews for students in preparation for employment opportunities. And I hear a lot of, I'll give you just the basics to answer that question, but I'm not going to go any further than that. I want to know the details. I want to be able to paint a picture of you in that experience or in that environment to see if that's transferable to my company or to the position that you're applying for. So being able to share the level of details so I can visualize that success or that struggle and see how you've overcome it or how you were successful with that and try to transfer that into my position to see if it is a good fit, to see if there's, whether it's behavioral situation or a skills situation. I want to make sure that you're a good fit for the company, but I can't do that if you only give me 5-word answers. I need to have enough detail in that open communication. And then the same thing too, though. It's your opportunity to ask us questions, so learn about the company, learn about the position, and find out, get your answers or get your questions answered. That's your opportunity to do that. And if you don't ask questions, I may say, well, geez, I guess this really wasn't that important position for you after all. You didn't even want to know about our company at all, and some of that is, hey, I've done my research already. So here's a question based off of what I've found. Wow. Now I know you've researched my company and I feel more valued to you in this position that I may offer you. So there's a lot of importance in that communication.
Yes, I would add that find a company that aligns with your core values and beliefs. That's really important because you're going to be working with that company, working for the company. The company culture is very important. Bring your best to the table. Also, just keep in mind, learn how to do it afraid sometimes. That's really important too, because sometimes, you're in a condition where you're just not sure, but then do it anyway. That also Jerry talked about transparency. That's so important. And honesty and transparency and communication and that dialogue with that employer is going to be very key to your success.
Well, I want to, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dennis Cooley. I'm the director of the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. I want to thank our panelists for the wonderful insights that they provided. And also to our two moderators, student moderators, who did a really good job just being thrown into this without any training on my part. So they did a great thing. But let's thank our moderators and our panelists. So thank you very much.